The rain had been falling for hours, washing the city in a gray, endless shimmer. Beneath the flickering light of a closed cafe's sign, a woman sat hunched over, her coat soaked through, her trembling hands clutching a paper cup that was empty except for a few coins. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and her eyes, soft yet hollow, watched the world pass her by. People hurried with umbrellas, shielding themselves not just from the rain, but from her presence, from the reminder of what desperation looked like. And then a man stopped. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way her shoulders shook when the cold wind hit, or maybe it was the silent plea in her gaze. But as he approached, she lifted her face and whispered in a voice almost too soft to hear, "Please don't tell anyone I'm homeless. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story. Because sometimes, even one act of kindness can change a life." The man's name was Ethan Carter, a 34-year-old graphic designer who had recently moved to the city for work. Life had been busy and predictable for him. Deadlines, office coffee, apartment bills, and the quiet loneliness that comes from living among millions yet feeling unseen. But something about this woman made him pause in his tracks. There was a dignity about her, despite her circumstances, as if she was trying to hide her pain behind invisible armor. Her name, as he soon learned, was Lillian. Lillian had once lived a life most would call ordinary. A steady job as a kindergarten teacher, a small apartment filled with laughter and art made by her students, and a fiancé who promised her forever. But life doesn't always unfold the way we plan. When her fiancé, Mark, was diagnosed with a rare heart condition, Lillian used every penny of her savings for his treatment. When that wasn't enough, she worked extra shifts, sold her furniture, and took loans. But when Mark passed away one cold December morning, everything in her world collapsed. She couldn't bear to stay in the apartment filled with his memories. The medical bills kept coming, her grief consumed her focus, and eventually, she lost her job. One by one, her belongings disappeared until all she had left was a suitcase, a coat, and the will to survive. Now, she slept near the train station, keeping her few possessions in a worn duffel bag. Each morning, she would find a quiet restroom to wash her face, comb her hair, and make herself look normal before searching for day work. She couldn't stand pity. That's why when Ethan stopped to talk to her, her first instinct wasn't to ask for help. It was to beg him not to tell anyone what she had become. Ethan felt a lump in his throat as he listened to her story. He couldn't imagine how someone so kind and gentle could have fallen so far. He offered to buy her a meal, and after some hesitation, she agreed. Inside a small diner, as steam rose from the coffee cups and the smell of pancakes filled the air, Lillian ate slowly, savoring every bite like it was something sacred. Ethan didn't push her to talk more. He just sat quietly, letting her have her moment of peace. Days turned into weeks, and their paths kept crossing. Sometimes he'd see her sitting on the same bench, reading an old tattered book. Other times, she'd be near the library, using their public computers to apply for jobs. Ethan began leaving small things where she could find them, an umbrella, a scarf, a thermos of coffee. He never made it feel like charity. Instead, he'd leave a little note each time for a strong soul who deserves better days. One day, when he found her missing from her usual spot, worry crept in. He searched around until he finally saw her sitting near the park fountain, shivering from exhaustion. Her face was pale, and her breathing shallow. Without a second thought, Ethan rushed to her side and took her to the nearest hospital. The doctor said she was severely dehydrated and malnourished, and if she hadn't been found that night, she might not have made it. Ethan stayed beside her through the night, watching over her as machines beeped steadily. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked at him with confusion and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Ethan simply smiled, because someone should. Lillian's recovery was slow but steady. Ethan visited her every day, bringing books, flowers, and warm meals. As the days passed, she began to open up more. She spoke about her students, her dreams, and how she used to believe kindness could heal anything. "I used to teach my kids that there's always light in people," she said softly, "but somewhere along the way, I forgot that lesson myself." When she was discharged, Ethan offered her a place to stay until she got back on her feet. At first, she refused. Pride still clung to her like a shadow, but eventually she agreed to stay just for a short while, just until she could find work. In Ethan's apartment, she began to feel something she hadn't in a long time: safety. She cooked small meals, helped with chores, and spent hours reading. Ethan, on the other hand, began to notice how much lighter his home felt with her in it. She laughed easily, often finding joy in little things, like the sound of rain or the smell of morning coffee. Yet beneath her smiles, Ethan could still see traces of her fear. The fear of becoming invisible again, of being unwanted. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, she said quietly, "You know, when you're homeless, people don't just avoid your eyes, they avoid your existence. You start to believe you don't matter anymore." Her voice broke slightly. "But you saw me when I didn't want to be seen." Ethan turned to her and said, "You mattered before I saw you, Lillian. You just needed someone to remind you." That night, something shifted. Lillian began applying for teaching positions again. She borrowed Ethan's laptop and spent hours polishing her resume. Weeks passed with no responses, and she began to lose hope. But one morning, she received an email from a local community center. They needed someone to help run an after-school program for underprivileged kids. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough to start rebuilding her life. When she told Ethan, he grinned and said, "See? The world hasn't forgotten you." Her first day back to work was emotional. As she stood in front of a small classroom filled with bright, curious faces, Lillian felt her heart swell. Those little hands that reached out to her, those giggles that filled the room, they healed something deep within her. For the first time in years, she felt whole. Months went by, and life slowly began to change for both of them. Lillian saved enough to rent her own small studio apartment. She would still visit Ethan often, bringing him home-cooked meals or inviting him to the community events. They had become each other's family, two souls who found light in the darkest corners. But one rainy evening, as they walked together past the cafe where they had first met, Lillian stopped and looked at the flickering sign. "I still remember that night," she said softly. "I remember how afraid I was that you'd tell someone. I thought being homeless made me less human." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for showing me I was wrong." Ethan smiled, his own eyes glistening. "You never stop being human, Lillian. You just needed a chance to start again." If this story has touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, because every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to rewrite someone's story. Lillian continued to work at the center, becoming a beacon of hope for many who had lost everything. She started a small project called Second Sunrise, where she and other volunteers helped homeless women learn skills, find shelter, and regain confidence. The project grew faster than anyone expected, and soon, local newspapers began covering her story. The woman who had once been homeless was now helping others find their way back home. When a reporter asked her what inspired her to start it, Lillian simply said, "A stranger once saw me when I was invisible. I just want to do the same for others." The night after her story was published, she visited the old park bench one last time, the same place where she once sat, shivering, hiding her pain from the world. She placed a single white flower there and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't say who it was for. Maybe for Mark, maybe for Ethan, or maybe for the version of herself who never gave up, even when the world turned away. Before leaving, she looked up at the sky, now clear after the rain. The stars seemed brighter that night, as if the universe itself was proud of her. Life hadn't been fair, but it had come full circle in a way she never expected. And somewhere deep in her heart she knew kindness had saved her in more ways than one. Before you go, please leave a comment below. What do you think is the most powerful act of kindness someone can show another person? Your words might inspire someone watching right now who needs a reminder that goodness still exists. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment, one person, and one choice to change a life forever. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and help us spread stories that remind the world kindness is never wasted.